time. Again, you like to see him play. His numbers weren't overwhelmingly great. They were, he was, just about as good as Minshew, though he had a better team around him, which is why, he was 5-0 as a starter. But look, he's probably going to get a 3-4 year deal. Smart on his end. And you know what? Hopefully he'll be ready in a few years to start.
All right. Well, with that said, okay, we want to welcome our favorite ACC guy, Tom Shanahan, back to the program. Tom, glad to have you back on. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Happy to be here.
Glad to have you. So, all right, let's talk about some college football rankings, if we may.
Well, we're finally to that point where the college football rankings regarding the playoffs are out. And a little bit of a surprise that Clemson, the defending national champion, wasn't among the top four. Most of you know by now Ohio State was number 1, LSU number 2, Alabama number 3, Penn State number 4. All those teams are 8-0. Clemson, which remember was the preseason number 1, is 9-0, but they dropped to number 5, which means if the playoff were today, they wouldn't be one of the 5 teams. Big reason for that, I think, is a lot of the national perception that the ACC isn't very good. And I think at this point that's hurting Clemson. Not sure that's true. The ACC is probably getting a little bit of a bad rap. The other conferences have their fair share of teams that are just, middling teams, but the ACC is getting a negative perception.
Okay, well, obviously you mentioned Clemson falling to number 5 because of the weak perception of the ACC. But, even though they are number 5 right now, I think it's inevitable with a couple good wins and the fact that they have a conference championship that they can get in the playoff. I mentioned this to a previous guest that I think one of the issues that you have with Clemson is the fact that North Carolina gave them a game, and that probably didn't help their cause any either, Tommy.
Yeah, and that's like I say that the ACC Coastal in particular, Clemson is in the Atlantic Division, but the Coastal Division has a lot of teams that are kind of hovering around 500. And I asked Duke coach David Cutcliffe about that, and he thinks that the Coastal has good teams. It's just that they're all beating each other, and they have this 500-ish like record. And I tend to agree with him. I mean, the SEC benefits from having Alabama and LSU and Georgia. But after that, how strong are some of the teams like Mississippi State, Arkansas, Tennessee? Tennessee lost to Georgia State. I just think it's more perception than reality.
Right. All right, so when the college football rankings came out, Tom, were there any surprises that you saw? Because obviously, again, you have a situation where LSU, and I know you're going to get to that, and Alabama are going to play, so that's going to impact the top 4 anyways, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess the surprise would be that you have 2 Big Ten teams, Ohio State at number 1 and Penn State at number 4, and then 2 SEC teams, LSU number 2, Alabama number 3. Just the fact that out of the whole country, it boils down to just 2 conferences.
Yeah, it does. I mean, well, for many years, the Big Ten, the conference used to beat each other up as well, and I think that the more quality teams you have, it's very difficult for a lot of these Big Ten schools to land in the Final Four because of the fact that they're getting better. And now that leads me to my next point. Okay, first of all, you have to give me a pick for LSU and Alabama.
Well, I think a lot is going to depend on how healthy Tua is.
Right.
Tua Tagovailoa, he's coming off that surgery. The game is at Alabama, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I guess I never root for Alabama, so I guess I would like to see LSU win, but I think Alabama being at home will probably win that game.
Okay. Well, now you have another one you want to talk about, Penn State, Minnesota. I'm glad because everybody that is coming on here has the chance to talk about Penn State, Minnesota. I'm going to sit here and mess around with the old Star Trek analogy that where no team has gone before, at least Minnesota's standpoint, that they are 8-0 and the first time since 1941 that they are actually 8-0, and P.J. Fleck got a nice payday over the week. So thoughts about that one?
Well, yeah, the Big Ten's West Division is kind of like the ACC's Coastal. They don't get much respect. But P.J. Fleck is a good coach, and I would say Penn State is probably going to beat them. It's going to be a cold game, I guess. Bad weather, a lot of snow, cold temperatures, so that might even things out. But I think Penn State probably has too much talent for Minnesota. Another team that's undefeated, like Minnesota, that's not being considered, not getting much weight in the college football ranking is Baylor. Baylor's kind of an interesting story, 8-0. Matt Rule has turned that program around. Of course, they had the scandals with under our brows with the sexual assault cases and the school covering it up. And it's pretty amazing that Matt Rule has turned that program around as quickly as he has. But again, people don't respect the schedules that Baylor and Minnesota have played.
You know what? I am so glad you brought up Matt Rule. I really am. This guy does not get the credit that he deserves. And think about what his body of work was. Wasn't he with Temple before he went to Baylor? And that situation was a bad, bad situation considering all the controversy that surrounded Baylor.
Yeah, he did such a good job at Temple that even after he's left, he left a pretty good foundation. And Temple is still a strong program now. They're still winning more consistently than they have historically. I kind of thought that Rule made a bad decision going to Baylor. I thought it would be hard to win at that school. It was hard to win before Art Briles came, and a lot of that was probably due to the spread offense, unique offense he came up with that scored a lot of points. For him to rebuild things like he has, I'm very surprised.
Yeah, I was a little caught off guard by that too. So Appalachian State takes on South Carolina, a team that's 7-1. App State, South Carolina 4-5. Any thoughts about that one?
Where's the game at?
I believe it's South Carolina.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, App State. Their coach went off to Louisville, but he left a good foundation for Eli Drinkwitz, who is the former North Carolina State offensive coordinator. And so he's done a good job. He's maintained the program. You got to figure South Carolina, which beat Georgia earlier, has too much talent for Appalachian State. And there's another example of the Coastal Division. Right. South Carolina beat Georgia, and North Carolina beat South Carolina. So those coastal teams, they don't have a lot of good records. They don't have a dominant team like Clemson, but they have. You look at all of them; they've had good games. North Carolina took Clemson down to the final second. In fact, Clemson had to stop a 2-point conversion to win the game. You look at Duke routed Virginia Tech 45-10. And then last week, Virginia Tech almost beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame needed a touchdown with 29 seconds left to beat Virginia Tech 21-20, a touchdown and the extra point. And like I think I said earlier, I asked Duke coach David Cutcliffe about that, and he thinks overall the Coastal is as strong as it's ever been. It's just that they're beating each other. And all the teams have problems with consistency. And he said the teams that can overcome consistency are like a Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, just because they have overwhelming talent. And there isn't a team like that in the Coastal Division. There isn't a team like that in the Big Ten West. So I tend to agree with him.
Okay. Any other thing you want to mention about the college football rankings that you want to say before we go into the undefeated?
Well, we got Oregon is hanging in there. Everybody was quick to write off the Pac-12 when they lost to Auburn to start out the season. Right. They haven't lost since then. First of all, let's back up. Ohio State and Penn State are going to play, so somebody's going to lose there.
Right.
And then LSU and Alabama are going to play. Somebody's going to lose there. So all those top 4 teams, you might have two. You're going to have 2 teams that lose, which means when next week's college football rankings come out, we might have 2 new teams in the top 4 spots. Clemson has a chance to move in there. They're going to play North Carolina State. North Carolina State normally might be a good, tough game for them. But North Carolina State has just been ravaged by injuries this year, and they're not having a good season. I would expect Clemson to win that game handily. And then at number 6, you got Georgia. Georgia has that loss to South Carolina, but they can win that SEC East, get into the championship game for the SEC, and knock off either Alabama or LSU and win the SEC title. And then I mentioned Oregon at number 7. Excuse me, Utah is number 8, so they're still in the picture to win the Pac-10 title. Interestingly, the top Big 12 team, you have to go all the way down to number 9 with Oklahoma. Oklahoma just has that one loss.
Right.
So the Big 12 actually isn't as – the Pac-12 is actually in a better position than the Big 12, at least as of right now.
Okay, you got about 3.5 minutes to talk about the Undefeated. Go for it.
Yeah, I was real happy. The Undefeated is the ESPN website about black sports and culture, and they did a pretty lengthy story on my book, Ray of Light, and focused on Jimmy Ray, who was the quarterback on the Michigan State team in 1966 when they played Notre Dame to a 10-10 tie in that game of the century, and this Notre Dame and Michigan State were named national co-champions, which made Jimmy Ray the South's first black quarterback to win a national title. But anyways, it's been my experience that a lot of the older media don't want to challenge the Bear Bryant miss that and the 1970 USC Alabama game miss. But this story was very. I was really happy with the story that it talked about how Michigan State, with Coach Duffy Doherty, is the school that actually did more than any other to lead the integration of college football, and that was because Duffy Doherty recruited a segregated South, and he did it. He did it on his own. He didn't get any help from Bear Bryant, which is a myth that has hurt Duffy Doherty's legacy. And I was just real happy with the story to appear in the Undefeated.
Well, I mean, let's not kid ourselves, Tom, okay? It's a good book. You had a great subject, and it's certainly one that had to be addressed. And anytime you get a major network or news source like ESPN gets on top of it, then it only to me, all it really does is reinforce the foresight you had that people are finally starting to acknowledge that in the first place. So, but you know what we're going to do, if you don't mind? I'd like your segments on Tuesday to be basketball-oriented, and I'd like you to do football on Thursday. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine, because, that's closer to the weekend games.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I certainly like to acknowledge college basketball. You're certainly good at it. But I think the way I continue to work with the format with the program, I'm finding that on a Thursday night, everybody's thinking about football. So we'll just bring in your Tuesday segment and let you talk about college basketball and come up with whatever you want. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, sounds good. In fact, as far as Thursday night football, speaking of Temple earlier, they're beating South Florida 14-7 tonight. And
I didn't really need to hear that. I'm a South Florida guy. Come on, Tommy, be nice to me. All right, yeah, they are. Well, one thing I should tell you, though, Temple's athletic director is Craig Angelos, and I worked with him over at FAU.
Oh, great.
Just in case you wanted to know. And his team played in the Boca Raton Bowl when he used to be at FAU. So a little bit of college football, sprinkle a little bit on that. So, But meanwhile, all right, then we'll focus on college basketball on Tuesday. Meanwhile, Tommy, you have yourself a great weekend. We appreciate you being on here all the time. Anytime that we can go ahead and make reference to your book, you know full well we're going to do it. No doubt about it, and especially as we get closer to Christmas time. Okay, Tommy?
All right. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on, Tommy. We appreciate you very much. Big time. Okay, buddy? Thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye. So some thoughts about what Tom Shanahan had to say about the way the conference, how this thing is going to ultimately play itself out.
When I interject, or at least put my headset back on and unmuted my mic. I actually heard him saying something in regards to what I was saying about Clemson's schedule kind of affecting them, and maybe that's why. And I think you had something earlier about that, especially that game that they almost lost to UNC.
Right.
Was very,